close Cyber 2022, I cannot believe we are in the closing plenary session. We have the one and only Professor Nik Peachey, connected from England, the UK, so it's super early there as well, with his session, Adapting Material for the Remote and Hybrid Classroom. I am very sure that if you work in the education, the TESOL, EFL, ESL field, you have either heard, read, or used some of the amazing, wonderful practical teaching resources Professor Peachey has created for English language teachers and learners. If you do not follow him on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, I would highly recommend you to do so because he offers really great tips and resources there. Professor Nik Peachey is Director of Pedagogy at PeacheyPublications, an independent digital publishing company that specializes in the design of digital learning materials. He has been involved in education since 1990 as a teacher, trainer, educational consultant, and project manager. He has more than 25 years of experience working specifically with online, remote, and blended learning environment. He has worked all over the world training teachers, and actually I met him back in 2009 in Argentina in one training course, and he develops innovative and creative products. He is a two-time British Council Innovations Award winner and has been shortlisted 6 times. Without further ado, welcome Professor Peachey, and thank you so much for accepting to present at this event.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thanks for that great introduction. I'll start with an apology. My voice isn't all that it should be this morning. I have a very bad cold at the moment, but and I'm not at my best at 5 o'clock in the morning either. So, but I'll do my best to get through this reasonably quickly and clearly. Okay, so yeah, this section is on adapting materials for the remote and hybrid classroom, which is something that I've spent quite a few years doing. I originally started working online. The first online course I taught on was back in 1998, and back in 2014 I was working with 100% online school, looking at how we could deliver lessons to students in Brazil, and we found that there were big problems with actually getting materials that were suitable for teaching in this kind of environment. And I think that problem's also been exacerbated by the move to hybrid learning and teaching. And so this is sort of some of my attempts to sort of remedy that problem, and I'll go into a bit more detail. I will also share the presentation with you, a link to the presentation with you at the end, so don't worry too much about getting links and things like that. I'll also share an app with some examples in as well if you want a copy of the app. So as Evelyn said, I'm Director of PeacheyPublications, and what we've set out to do is solve some of the problems associated with, publishing materials for this kind of environment and for working in hybrid classrooms. And those solutions go across kind of pedagogical areas, regardless of whether you're teaching English language or you're teaching something else. So what I'll show you is some examples, some of the problems and challenges, and some of the tools that you can use to solve those problems. So let's have a look at some of the challenges first. One of the initial challenges that we had when we first started looking around for kind of digital materials that worked in this environment was that, the majority of what publishers were providing were actually PDF versions of books. And because they were PDF versions of books, they were in the kind of portrait format rather than being designed for landscape format. And so that was one of the first things we looked at solving. It doesn't sound like a huge problem, and it's, for us, it wasn't starting from scratch. It wasn't a difficult problem to solve, but it was producing problems for teachers trying to work with those books. It made them very difficult to see, and screen visibility was poor and things like that. One of the other problems that we found teachers were having is that they were struggling to sort of deliver audio within the classroom when they wanted to do listening activities. you know, they found it hard to use the platform to deliver the audio. In some cases, students were having to download audio clips. They were downloading at different speeds. The teacher was trying to run it from the audio from their computer, and that wasn't working. They were having problems with that. So that was another of the kind of technical problems. And of course, you know, I think one of the biggest problems is the kind of limited interaction with the materials, and a lot of limited interaction that the materials were creating for this kind of, particularly for this kind of environment. Most of the PDF versions of course books were basically restricted to, you know, answering questions and seeing whether you had the answer right, you know, which again provided a lot of problems for teachers, because, you know, they liked controlling the answers and having some control of whether, when students got the answers, so that they didn't just click through and find what the answers were without really thinking. I guess one of the other biggest problems now is the hybrid mix, and making the same materials available to your students in the physical classroom as your students are getting in the remote classroom. You know, having something that works across both of those platforms, you know, is very difficult. Pairing and group work was also very difficult, to sort of pair students who were in the physical classroom maybe with students who were in the remote classroom, and making sure that they had access to those materials is also a problem. And one of the other problems was, of course, you know, teacher skills, the ability to sort of work dynamically. You know, most teachers in this kind of environment, when they sit down to teach, are very close to the camera, and they're used to looking at their screen. They're not used to looking at their students. And, you know, if you're trying to relate to students, you really need to move a bit further back, and then you can use your body language. I've got my hands working away all the time when I teach. And so, you know, having that experience to sort of use this space, you know, in the same way that you would with your classroom space. So that was, of course, another problem. But of course, moving into this environment and working like this isn't only about problems. You know, it also does offer some amazing opportunities. And I think, you know, some of the big opportunities that working like this can offer. And I think that what teachers have found is there's much more opportunity to use technology and get students hands-on with using technology. You know, in the physical classroom, you had lots of students in the physical classroom. You know, there were problems with internet connection, problems with teachers' ability to use internet-based resources. You know, and now we have students sitting at a computer who are used to sitting at a computer and used to working with digital resources. And I think that's opened up a lot of possibilities for our students. You know, they've got access all the time now, because they're at their computer. They've got access to lots of authentic content that they didn't have, you know, when we were sitting in the physical classroom with just a course book. So when we're designing materials, we can also link in that authentic web-based content. We have access to lots of collaborative digital tools now, so students can work together using different platforms and different content tools. So that's another great opportunity, I think. You know, we have breakout rooms, so we can provide space for team building and teamwork. You know, in the physical classroom, you have all of your students in the same class. It's much harder to get them to work independently in groups. In the remote classroom, we can actually put them into breakout rooms and get them to work together and go around and monitor and give them some private space. You know, I think it's a great opportunity to do sort of project work and project-based learning, because they have access now, and they're at computers. They can work with digital media and work collaboratively through digital media. You know, this ability to collaborate through digital resources and produce sort of digital artifacts together, I think, is an important part of their future learning skills. And of course, as in terms of assessment, you know, I think it's very interesting that, you know, through a digital platform, every interaction can be tracked. if you're using digital materials and you have an LMS, or even if you're using Zoom, all these kinds of interactions can be tracked, and we can actually feed that information into assessment, and I think that's very useful too. So those are some of the opportunities that I see. In terms of solutions and how we take advantage of those opportunities, I'll show you some examples of some of the materials that I've built, and then some of the tools that I've used to build them. I'll just have some water. Okay, so this is an example of one of my lessons, or the materials for one of my students' lessons. And one of the things that I make sure I do is, I build the materials on the web, so that all of the student materials are designed in HTML5. They're built on the web, and so students can very easily access them through mobile devices or through their computer laptop. As you can see, I've put a QR code on this one here. So if students want to follow using their digital device, they can scan the QR code onto their mobile phone and access the materials that way. So a student working remotely can very easily access the same materials that I'm showing on a projector in the classroom, as can my students in the classroom. I'll just click through to that one and show you what a typical sort of lesson material looks like. So I can just click through. I've got an index, so I can jump to different activities, and I have digital tools embedded, so I can launch a digital whiteboard directly from the material if I want to, using a tool called CryptPad. Or I can launch a digital notepad immediately from the materials as well. So if I want to take notes and then share these notes with my students at the end of the lesson, I can do that using this sort of simple whiteboard, simple document. And those are automatically generated to be unique. I can sort of build in color and images. With the audio, I've built the audio into the presentation screen, so I can play the audio, or the teacher can play the audio directly from here, or they can just sort of click on a button and give students access to the audio through their mobile phones, so they can scan the QR code and they can start listening independently if they want to, which makes the listening activities that much more flexible. If they've got the audio, they can listen at their own speed, they can listen autonomously and work in that way. There's also an interactive button here again, where they can do sort of interactive activities, while they're as part of the lesson. So I can embed these into the teacher's materials and the students' materials. They can do sort of independent listening and dictation activities and get instant feedback. And again, the teacher has the option to do these leading the class, or they can get the students to scan a QR code, and then they'll be able to work independently doing that activity and then come together with the class to do it together. So these are all the kinds of things that we can sort of build in, these kind of interactive activities. And I can sort of link in other materials and embed materials to drive discussion. So this is a discussion about, recycling of mobile phones, and they can sort of link to an infographic afterwards and check out and find out about some statistics from the real world. So that's a typical example of a lesson, the kinds of things that we can do in a lesson. Listening activities. One of the other nice things that are possible with digital materials, and when you've got different students working in different rooms, is that you can actually give them different audios to listen to. So for example, I've got a materials here for business, where I can divide students into 3 groups, and they can listen to different audio tracks just by scanning the QR code for their group. And then they can get together and compare what they've learned. So I can do those split kind of listening activities, and having different students listening to different things and then coming back together and discussing those together. so that I put much more of the emphasis onto student learning and student collaboration and working together. I can sort of embed video into these lessons as well. So, and again, I can make these accessible by QR codes as well. So if we've got a discussion here and we've got the video built in, which we can play automatically from within our materials, and that opens up lots of options for building video into materials and building more interesting materials. All of the materials are built using a tool called Genially, which is, as I said earlier, produces HTML5.
You are gone in Jesus' name.
And so there's lots of reasons for using that. So using this tool Genially, I can embed materials, I can link out to the web. I have these interactive buttons that I can open to use. I'll pass you a link to Genially, actually, in case you want to try it. The link is now in the chat. And Genially is a great tool. You can use it for free, and you can produce a lot of materials for free. There are some additional features that you get if you pay for it, which of course I use because I use it for all my professional materials. But using it for free, you can still produce most of the materials that you've seen here. Mostly the premium price offers branding, so if you want the school's branding on it, then it's better. And you can produce lots of different materials for it, so presentations or interactive infographics or something like that. The other thing that I do is I build as I showed you, I built some interactive materials, and you can build and embed these in either using interactive buttons like this one. So this is an example of a closed gap fill. So students listen to the audio and type in. We have structured writing tasks, so we can use prompts and students actually write in their answers, and then once they're finished, they can produce a document automatically of their writing. Writing tasks for lexical development that gives students instant feedback as well. So lots of different types of interactive activities, including ones that check their pronunciation so they can speak to the computer and get some feedback from the computer if they're using Google Chrome. So these are all very, very useful types of activities that we can build into the materials. And these are built using something called H5P, which is a free and open source platform if you're using Moodle or if you're using WordPress. And there are lots of different types of activities you can build using it. And these are all some examples. So if you're interested in finding out more about those, go to that link and check out some of the example activities here. It has very nice a way of building interaction around video, so it can build questions into the video. So the video pauses and they can answer questions about it, that kind of thing. And those are, as I said, those are all built using H5P and then embedded into the materials. The other thing that I've done for students with my materials is I've built apps for them so that they can actually have an app on there. If for some of the course books that have a collection of units, they have an app that they can download onto their phone, and then they can follow the lesson on their app. So I'll just see if one of these will open for us. No. I'll just have to grab a pin. So once they've signed in, one moment, I can hear my 837. So students sign in and they have a little app that they can use. So they've got the classroom materials here and they can scroll through the different units, and they have all their different activities. So it includes all the listening, and they can take their notes on the actual app. and go to the next task, that kind of thing. And I have some self-study materials built into those as well, which they can kind of easily access through the app too. So dictation activities, listening activities. So, that kind of builds a nice bond with the materials, because they have the materials on their phone all of the time, which can be really helpful. They can bring them into class on their phone, or they can use them from home if they're working remotely from home on their phone. And those apps were all built using a free platform. This is a platform called Glide apps, and it's a very easy tool for developing mobile apps from a Google spreadsheet. So you just put all the content you want into your Google spreadsheet and then open it within the Glide platform, and then you can configure the interface to make it look how you want it to look. So it takes a little bit of learning. I think it took me about a day to build my first app, but after that, you realize that it's very, very simple to build your own mobile apps with content for your students. And I'll pass you a link to that. If you missed the links, then you can pick them up when I give you the link to the presentation. So that's sort of how we build, and enable students to access more of the materials. If you'd like a free example, what I've done is I've built an app for teachers, which is called the Teachers Classroom app. And there's a free version of it here if you'd like a copy. You can either scan the QR code. It works better on desktop, actually, and you can download the instructions from here. Again, I'll share the link to that with you through the chat. There's the chat. There's the chat link. And so if you'd like to get a copy of that, just find the link. I'll put it in just once more into chat, and you can download a free copy. And it has some examples of all the different materials and the app that I built. This app is built to work in desktop, so you can put it onto your desktop and then launch it directly from there for students to use. So that's just about my time for now. So I'm happy to sort of try and answer any questions if you have any questions, or any comments either through chat or through the microphone if you want to switch your microphone on.
Thank you so much, Professor Nik. I would just like to add, because you said a lot of good things about this, but are there cons to it?
Are there cons to it? As a publisher, there are cons to it. And that's in a way, that's a really interesting question, because it's in a way the publishing model is why materials design hasn't moved forward. Traditional publishers have built their financial base on selling lots of physical course books, which we know are very expensive. Getting lots of students, if you've got 30 students in your class, selling each one of them a course book is very profitable. Whereas, the model that I built my business on is selling materials to either the school in digital format or the teacher. And so the student doesn't have to pay anything. So of course, the market is much smaller because there are far fewer teachers than students. And so it's not such a kind of, financially rewarding model. But, it is the model that can make the materials much more accessible for teachers. So, it's the right thing to do, I guess, ethically or morally, but financially, it's not, it's not the best way to go about things, because, it endangers publishers and, their publishing model. So that's one of the big, I guess, cons about it. By cons, I mean disadvantages as well.
Professor Peachey, amazing presentation. We are honored and privileged by your presence, and we can't thank you enough for spending the time of your early morning presenting to us. We do have a few minutes for questions, so if you have a question, please raise your hand, or so we can take them, and we have a few minutes for questions if you don't mind, Professor Peachey. But again, we thank you for your presentation. A lot of great and amazing stuff. Yeah,
I've just put a link to the presentation in the chat if you want to get a copy of it.
Absolutely, thank you.
Access is through the.
So anybody online or in presence on campus have any questions? Professor Lipo, can you poll the attendees at the campus, see if we have questions there? If not, we have a couple questions online.
On site, any questions? Looks like no, so let's go to online.
Child?
I have a question. Hello.
Hi, yeah.
Yeah, I said in my area there's they just took the lights in my area in LA. But my question is there any maybe where it's recorded that we can still rewatch this?
I think the presentation is recorded, yeah. So you should be able to watch it later.
Okay,
But
so where can we get that?
I guess it'll take a while to get it online. I think that's a question for the administrators, the organisers. I can see there's also a hand up somewhere. Somebody's got their hand up. Oh, yeah,
Shail,
that's the person asking the question.
If you can go ahead and unmute yourself online, Shail, go ahead. We can't hear you.
Right. Okay.
There you go.
Peachey, thank you so much. It's a very interesting new tool. I didn't know it existed since 1998, but it's very interesting how the way you're teaching students and the interaction you have, the development you have done for the online interaction. So my question was, I see most of your material has been created for the teachers and when they are teaching the students. I see there are some interactive apps, but is there a possibility of expanding this further into interactive books like the presentations and the interactive apps give us limited amount of information. So if we have a complete book like ebooks, which we have usually in PDF versions, can we add interactions to that as well as add videos or those kind of activities and provide it directly to the student to explain this more?
Yeah, in the case of my materials, what happens is the teacher downloads a lesson plan, and so the lesson plan is in PDF format, and it has all the information that the teacher needs to actually run the class. What you've seen here is the kind of what the student sees. So the teacher can decide how much information they feed in from the lesson plan. There are additional links to other materials if they need them. And again, if you want to design in more content or more reading content, within the materials, all of that is possible to do, using these different tools that we've used. So that's a possibility. Most of the materials that I've developed have been developed to sort of promote discussion and interaction within the classroom. So they're not content heavy. They're more about promoting interaction between students and collaboration between students rather than the delivery of kind of, sort of input of information. But you can do that. That's still a possibility. I think we have another hand up.
We have time for one more quick question. Tololope, go ahead. If you can unmute and ask your question, we have time for just one more.
Okay, thank you, Professor Nik. That was really wonderful. Thank you for answering my first question too. I just wanted to find out, so this sounds really wonderful, except that I'm wondering if there are countries or regions in the world that are not adopting this as much as you are, you're very enthusiastic about it, but are there regions in the world that are not so, they're not adopting it as much?
I think, the ability to adopt this kind of model and use these kind of materials is dependent on your connectivity. Although, I think issues around connectivity have improved a lot. I think I might have, no, I've still got it. Issues around connectivity have improved a lot because of the pandemic. We've found that a lot more countries that were putting low priority on connectivity have moved to online and during the pandemic, and so internet connectivity has been improved a lot. But certainly there are some areas in the world and where there's significant levels of poverty where it is much more difficult, and that is a problem. It is. But I mean, one of the things that can help with that again is mobile connectivity, and producing the kind of free apps for students can help with that a lot. But I'm well aware, I've worked in a lot of places around the world where sort of connectivity is a huge problem, and a whole family might be, their only access to the internet might be through a single phone, which they all have to share and use. So getting that to have your English lesson can be really challenging. But that's
Thank
something that I
you.
can't help with.
Professor
Yeah,
Peachey,
I'm
there was
sorry.
one more.
Okay.
There was
Go
one
ahead.
more that was in the chat. Dr. Chancha is going to be actually providing our closing comments, but there was a question from Tiffany McKinnon, and she asks, how would online publication practices change the accessibility of textbooks? And we notice that when it comes to a price point, usually a digital copy would be cheaper. How does that compare to what your particular model presents?
In terms of price, I guess the materials that I produce, the cost is fractional, really. I mean, because, for example, a lesson plan would be sort of something like $3 to $4, and the teacher can use that as many times as he likes or she likes, and students don't have to pay anything. So compared to, buying, course books for every student, that it's a fractional model in terms of that.
Do you anticipate that the shift in that model to continue to electronic materials and price point and versus printed materials?
I think so, and I hope so. The other thing that I intended when building the app for teachers is that's available on a subscription model. So a school, for example, could subscribe to the app and have access to all of our materials through the app. At one price and give access to 50 teachers, and students wouldn't have to pay anything. So, so that we've got something like sort of 200 lesson plans that teachers could have, you could give instant access to for your all of your teachers, and that